Welcome back to the Champions Podcast, and I am so excited about this one today. There are some people that are just special. And, I love the visitor. And there are some people that are just so special, and Whitney's one of them. Um, I remember growing up with Whitney, watching her and being inspired by her and who she was as a person. And then as I kind of went off to college and came back and really was just curious about what Whitney was going to do and where the Lord was going to lead her. And now married with a little girl, and there's quite a story behind that. Lillian is just precious. And so, Whitney, why don't you share a little bit about your story, whatever the Lord has laid on your heart?
Okay. So Champ and Heather asked me to do this, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do it because I don't like being on video, but I said I'll do it. Um, Someone said a few years ago, if someone asks you to share your story, you better say yes. So here I am. So my story. So I have grown up in church my whole life. Kind of grew up in church with Champ and Heather for whenever they came along for a little while. And so I've been involved in church my whole life. So I don't have a extravagant story of, you know, being saved and all that stuff. I have been saved, but some people have, huge stories. Mine's kind of simple. Been in church my whole life. I have wonderful parents who made sure that I was at church and involved. Um, Mom, can you get her? And then, life went on, involved in youth group, Bible school, all the things. And then in 2021 is kind of where I've had a story all along, but 2021 is kind of where my story kind of took off a little bit. I met my husband online. We went on our first date in September of 2021. The rest was history. We got married in May of 2023. I gained wonderful in laws, a wonderful husband. Um, but that kind of goes back to kind of leads all into my story about my IVF journey. So my husband, whenever we were dating, this was before we even met, he said, I just want to let you know that I have neurofibromatosis. Um, if you don't want to talk to me anymore, that's okay. And I was like, I didn't even know what it was. So I looked it up, of course, the medical side of me. By the way, I'm a nurse. Um, so I looked that up and I saw what it was. And I remember at Sunday school, we were doing the lesson and it was a Tim Tebow study. And I don't remember the name of it, but one of the lessons was he was on a missions trip somewhere and he was speaking at an event on this missions trip and three boys walked up and they he said he distinctly like focused on them and saw them and then he saw them leave. They didn't stay. um he said that so after the event was over, he went to meet them and they said, we were told that we weren't good enough and that we shouldn't be there. Um, so we were told to go back to our hut. So he found where their hut was and went back. And so one of the boys ended up, whenever he was born, his feet were on backwards. And he said, this does not define who you are, just saying how important of a person he is to God. And he was able to share that news. And that right there clicked with me. And I was like, what kind of person would I be if I told this man who may be an amazing person that I don't want to talk to him anymore because of his condition? So that's kind of where our story starts with the neurofibromatosis. So we dated for almost, let's see, about 6 months, I think. We got engaged in May of 2022. Um, and then I finished nursing school in August of 2022 because my dad told him that we could not get married until I finished nursing school. So then we got married in May of 2023. Um, and we knew we wanted to be married for at least a year before we started talking about kids or having kids. And um, we, plenty of people around us had gone through IVF. Um, some, through different stories, people had gone through adoption, and we talked about adoption. We knew that naturally we would not be able to have a child. Well, we could, but we did not want the child to endure what Mike has endured his life and still does. Um, so we prayed about it a lot. We went to our preacher Mel who married us and asked him, we told him what our plan was going to be, and he said, I think y'all need to take a step back and talk with your doctors and just see, because we had our mindset we were going to adopt, and whether that be embryo adoption or adoption. And he told us, he was like, I think you need to take a step back. So we're like, okay. So I went and seen my doctor, and I told him what our story was kind of, and he said, I know just the person who you need to go and see. It was God was involved in the story every step of the way. He said there's a reproductive endocrinologist in Somerville. He and I were roommates in med school, and he's great. The nurse came in. She said, I had to go through IVF. She said, this is who I used. They're amazing. I called that day. They wanted me to come the next week. I couldn't due to a conflict of schedule. So we went the following week. This was in March of 2020, March of 2024. And so we went and seen him. I'd already done a lot of research and everything on IVF and what our options were. And a lot of people didn't know about this. I had no idea about it. My OBGYN told me, he was like, there's a such thing called PGT, which is pre-implantation genetic testing. So I looked it up, did all my research. We went to the appointment with the reproductive endocrinologist. He was amazing. He sat there with us for 2 hours and talked to us and told us kind of what our options were, what, the risks were, the odds that we were up against and everything. So we're like, okay. He was like, you'll be pregnant by the summer. And I was like, okay. So by the summer, we were not pregnant. So we literally, it was a whole touch and go round from March until December. We had a lot of appointments. We had genetic counseling. Mike had to do labs. I had to do ultrasounds and labs, sometimes 2 and 3 and 4 times a week. It was, and then the doctor just kept reassuring me. He said, if you want to do it now, we can. He was like, but I just want to make sure that everything is perfect whenever we start. So, and I had struggled a lot with that from March, because I'm like, okay, he said we'd be pregnant by the summer. We're still not pregnant. We're not even starting the whole IVF process yet. We've just been doing labs, doing ultrasounds, all this. So it was like everywhere we went and he said we were going to start, there was a brick wall. And then finally, I gone to a women's weekend in Darlington. It's called Women of Grace, and we go every year. A wonderful event, and the lady talked about the title for the weekend was Be Still and Know. And that night she talked about, the first night she said, we say we're gonna, lay things down at God's feet. And she said, how many times do you go back and pick it up? And so, and I was like, okay, that's, I was like, that hit home. I was like, it's easy to say you're giving something to God, but when are you truly giving it to him? Um, I decided that weekend, I was like, this is out of my control. Whenever God is ready for this, He will make it happen. Um, so we literally, that Monday, I had an appointment and I went in, talked to the doctor. They drew my blood, did an ultrasound, and he said, all right, are you ready to start? And I was like, start what? And he said, are you ready to start? He said, let's start tomorrow. This will work if we do this, this, and this. So literally that weekend, I had made the decision like, I'm giving this to God, He's in control. And that Monday, I was just like, it was like the aha moment. Like, okay, I really figured out that I had no control over this situation. Um, and God took control, and it was just uh it was so much from there too. But it was like a constant happiness because you were like always waiting for the next step. Always waiting for, okay, what's going to happen, what's next, and then I just had to keep reminding myself. Then in October, I had my retrieval day, my egg retrieval, and they were able to retrieve 20 eggs. And the night before we went for egg retrieval, we were at we were at our church setting up for a ladies brunch, and our preacher was there. Mel said, everyone come over, lay hands on Mike and Whitney. And he said, whenever I texted him and told him they got 20 eggs, he said, there were 20 people there last night. Um, so the daughter said he came in and he was like, I'm blown away. He said, I expected 7. He said, but there's 20. So 13 eggs fertilized. And then you have to go through like a whole other process of injections and stuff like that. And then it ended up being 6 eggs that grew to the embryo that were viable. And we had, so they did the genetic testing on the 6 embryos. None of the embryos had the neurofibromatosis gene, not one of them. One of the embryos was absolutely the perfect embryo, and it was a girl. So December 18th, we went to Somerville and we had our transfer day. And then that was a whole nother nerve wracking thing because you have to wait. You have to wait for like 2 weeks and they tell you don't do a home pregnancy test. And of course, I did one. Um, and then they were like, you have to go for your blood work. So I went for my blood work. And my HCG level was good. And then I had to, and they're like, well, still, they don't say anything then because that's just the first one. So when we went for the second level, it had doubled, almost tripled. And they were like, congratulations, you're pregnant. And I was like, from March to December was just looking back now, like, it's just amazing all that we went through and the struggles and the tears and the prayers and all of that. And I say all of that to say just, the whole be still and know, that He is God. He's good. He's always there. He's always on time and He's in control.
And as you were saying this, I was just like, wow, when you said like the 20 people and the 20, I was like, oh my gosh, God just works in such ways. What was it like just obviously being a first time parent when you were able to hold, and I'm gonna call her the miracle child because that's really what she is.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you and Mike were able to first hold your baby girl, what was that feeling like knowing? Because obviously everybody that I'm not a parent, Champ's not a parent, but we can imagine just the regular journey that people go through and they get to hold that baby. But when you go through an extraordinary journey like IVF and, the possibility of what if we don't ever be able to have a child, and then to hold that baby, what was that like to just kind of feel like God did it, and looking down
It's,
at her?
I mean, it's truly unexplainable. Um, I remember going for some of my appointments, and I remember one day I went in, and it was like every time I went for an appointment, this was after I was pregnant, I was back with my OBGYN, and they were like, every time I go in, they say, all right, we're doing an ultrasound. And my heart would start beating so fast. I'm like, oh my gosh, what if something's wrong? They're like, we're going to do fetal heart tones just to check and make sure the baby's okay. And I remember one day I was sitting there and I heard a lady or a girl walking out and she was crying. She had lost her baby. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, what if this happens to me? And then I was like, I had to constantly remember, like, I said I was giving all of this to God and He is in control. But there's so many people that don't get to experience that. And like I said, it's an unexplainable feeling. Like, they told me, whenever I had her, they were like, they had the NICU team in there, due to some like complications during my delivery and stuff. And they said, she may not cry right at first, but and as soon as she came out, she was crying. Everything was fine.
Oh,
And
she
just
started
seeing
talking.
her.
I mean, she started this podcast with talking. She was talking to us.
Oh yeah, she's eating now. But I mean, absolutely amazing. The best feeling ever. It's a love that you never knew that you could experience.
Champ, I know you have a question or something to
Oh,
say.
I love the tears. I do. I love the tears, Whitney, because I know that this had always been, or this was always kind of a dream of yours. And for so long, you kind of wondered, I think, Lord, are you going to answer this prayer? What if, and what do I do? And, I think about the nursing school. I think about how you wanted that so desperately. And the Lord answered that prayer. And then Mike and then Lillian and the 20 people. And I'm thinking of all of these things, like all of these little caveats that come back to now, and just looking back and going, I know you believe, but how could someone else not, right? Like, how could you not see all this and go, what in the world is this? And I hope that some of that is confirmation. I know it's confirmation for you, but I hope that it's confirmation for other people that God answers those prayers in that way. And even though He may not answer every prayer, He does. I don't know. He answers when He needs to, right?
Absolutely. I
To
mean,
to
I don't
reassure us.
understand, like my church family, my close friends, which are mainly my church family. I don't know how people function or go through battles without that support because I mean, everyone prayed. I mean, it was, it was a God thing the whole time. So that the song "God is in the Story" was always came to mind.
I even think about when obviously she gets to an age where she can understand and you're able to even tell her the story of how God brought her in the world. I mean, what a special moment that'll be for her to realize. I think in a way it's going to even make her realize that God is real by knowing I wouldn't be here without the miracle. And I
Absolutely.
mean, even when she came on camera a few minutes ago, the just joy in that little baby's face. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
you can
She's
just see it
amazing.
light
She's the
up.
happiest thing.
Champ,
What have you?
I want to ask Champ this really quick because obviously I grew up around you. Our families have always just been so close. But Champ obviously has probably spent a little more time with you because I've ended up not going to the same church after a while. Champ, what has it been like for you to watch Whitney go through all this? Because, sometimes we knew kind of some of the journey, but maybe everybody didn't know the struggle behind the smiling face, because maybe you didn't put it out there, hey, this is going on, I'm having a rough day, we're feeling discouraged. What was it like for you, Champ, to kind of see her through all these hard days and the doubts and the what ifs and then seeing it all come to fruition?
So, Whitney, I'm going to put you on the spot because I our stories are vastly different, but they're somewhat similar in the sense that, when you and Mike met, let's go back there, right? When you and Mike met, you were older, right? You had kind of gone through life a little bit. You were, might I say, questioning some of that, right? Questioning if the Lord
Absolutely.
would answer
I mean, I
that
I
prayer.
tell Mike all the time, I say, when I went on that date with you, I was not planning to meet my husband. I had already accepted that I would be single for forever. I had my nieces, Callie and Amelia, and I treated them like they were my own. I still do, but it's different now that I have my own child, but they were like part of me, and I had already accepted that, and I was like, I'm okay with it. But that's the whole thing. You thinking you know what's going on, but God has a whole different plan.
And so I bring that out because I think some of us had kind of accepted it with you and for you. And then when it happened, you're like, wait a minute, what? That took a little slight of a turn that nobody expected. And then I look at you now and I think for me, I think about how emboldened that made you, right? As a believer, as somebody who trusts. Like we say we're Christians, right? We say we've done all the things, we've been all the places, we've gone to the camps, we've read the books, we've said the prayers, we've ate the food, but have we ever really stepped into all of it? And like when you see somebody who you looked up to, I remember. So I asked Whitney to go with me one time to, I think it was Miss South Carolina Baptist. And that was around a season of life where I honestly kind of accepted everything for you and with you and said, eh, it'll be what it'll be. The Lord will provide it. And then as I look back now and look at you now, I'm like, never question anything. Never write anything off. Because my friend, every time I see you, it's like you are bolder, you are more thrilled than I've ever seen you before. You are more confident than I've ever seen you before. And watching you weep just now in this conversation is such a it's just such a confirmation of trusting that the story is still being written and the pages are being turned and the canvases are clear. So
Had a
what
glow is what she had. She had a glow up.
she did, she had a glow up and a blow up
Well,
that she
both
wasn't
of y'all
expecting.
have, you know, y'all have inspired me. Y'all have defied all the odds. I feel like my story is nothing compared to y'all's story, but
We
y'all have
don't
also
compare.
been an
We don't
inspiration to me
compare.
as well.
We don't. I was thinking the same thing. I don't compare. I look at you now and I see some of the things that I long for, and I say, if the Lord has done it for her, just keep trusting Him, keep pushing.
Absolutely. I mean,
You know?
and I help with the youth at church, and some of the girls in there, they've had relationships and they're like, and I was like, y'all, I was like, it's okay to get married at 30 something. Like, like it's okay. And I look back on had I gotten married and when I was 20 something, or I wouldn't have been ready for all this. Like, my life is in a whole different place right now. And like, God had a plan. He was in control the whole time. He knew what he was doing.
And I
Do
think
you? Okay, I want.
it's so powerful because I know that there are so many people, and it seems like now more than ever, I hear so many people that are having to go through IVF, that hearing somebody like your story and seeing the success and the thriving, I feel like that would just give them so much hope to say, you know, one foot in front of the other, day by day, but we're going to keep praying through this. And it may not happen for everyone, and and that's something that you have to accept, but it did happen for you and Mike, and I just feel like it's such a testament to God's mercy, but it's also testament to how you stood in faith. And now you're able to, like you said, about sharing your story. Maybe this isn't what you do on a regular basis, right? But it's something that you chose to do today. That somebody that's hearing this episode may be going through, that they don't even have it out there that they're going through it. And they say, wow, it can happen for me.
I mean, absolutely. And one of my biggest supporters through all of it was Emily Bird. I know she's been on y'all's, but Emily reached out after everything she was going through. She was still there for me every step of the way. Like the day that I had my transfer day, like she showed up at my front door with food and flowers. And I was like, you're not, I was like, you didn't have to do this. This isn't what I was like, you don't, because it was for me. And I was like, I got the baby, and like grieve for her.
Yeah.
But her outlook and all that she's been through and her story is just amazing and inspires me as well.
So two final questions. One goes back to, even though you've gotten some of the prayers that you prayed answered, are there still moments that you wrestle, right? And the other part of the question is, how have you seen it change Mike in his kind of walk in learning to trust, both through what God's done in both of you, but just watching him as your husband kind of probably just take that on for himself in a different way.
Mike has grown so much. He's come out of his shell so much.
He had to. He had to.
Whenever Mike and I met, he had not been to church in 20 years. And now there's rarely a Sunday that he misses. He helps with the youth. He's up normally first before me on Sunday mornings getting ready, and he's involved, and I think he's in a lot better place than where he was too now. I've seen him grow, and he's patient and just, I mean, he's wonderful. He's learning so much being a dad. I mean, because he had never been around kids a lot before, but he's amazing. He does such a great job.
And what would be, as we wrap up in the last couple minutes here today, is there any advice coming from the position you've been to maybe those potential parents out there that are praying and being hopeful that they could be kind of where you are today?
Don't give up. Don't settle, and be still.
That's my life verse right there. Be still and know.
Well, Whitney, we thank you so much just for your vulnerability today. And also, I know Champ and I have talked about you before we even had this episode, and we were on the phone and just said, what an incredible journey. And it feels so good in our heart, warms our heart because we've known you since we, were kids, and to see where you are today, it's just amazing. And like you said, don't give up. And I just am so happy for you and Mike and your entire family. I mean, what a beautiful, beautiful blessing. And so we thank you so much for just sharing your story and, maybe coming out of your comfort zone a little bit to share all this, because I know it's going to touch people's hearts. And so we enjoyed having you, and we hope everybody enjoyed this episode of the Champions, and we'll see you back next week.
Yeah. Thank y'all.